Excellent. Okay, so welcome tonight, folks, and thank you very much for joining us tonight for a tasting. And for those who haven't joined a Zoom tasting with us before, just a little bit about how it's going to work before I introduce Kim and Erica and we start the tasting. So what we'll do is we do have everyone on mute. If you'd like to ask a question tonight, probably the easiest way to do it is just to use the chat function down the bottom of your screen, and you can send that through to me either directly or send the question through to everyone, and then we'll stop Kim and Erica at the right time and just ask them that question. And of course, you know, it's a little bit different doing a tasting via Zoom to doing a tasting in person in our wine room. And I think one of the things you do miss is you miss chatting to the person beside you. But you can chat via chat digitally. So do feel free to use that, chat with the group or chat with others that are on the call as well. And just an update following the announcement, of course, that we're at level 2 for a little bit longer. That does mean for any in-person tastings in the Auckland region that we will be either postponing them or moving them virtually. And I know there's a lot of discussion about, you know, gathering numbers can now increase under level 2. But it's just our view that, you know, tasting wine and spitting things out and doing that kind of thing collectively at the moment's perhaps not the responsible way to go. So we'll wait to do our in-person things until we move safely back into level 1. So it's more virtual stuff in the meantime, which is fun. We're getting used to it, and certainly really enjoying having all of our friends from around the country with us. So it's great. So tonight's tasting, what we had thought would be really fun to do is today is the start of Organic Wine Week. And what better way to kick that off than a Monday night chat with Erica and Kim about organic viticulture, winemaking, and of course their wonderful Loveblock wines. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And I understand, Erica, you're going to tell us all about organics, is that right?
Yes, otherwise you get too many opinions around the wine, I suppose. But, you know, we've got 2 different sets of skill sets. I've got the winemaking covered over here, and then I'll cover the viticulture and the organics. Because, you know, Liz, one doesn't just take to organics because it's going to make you more money, because it doesn't. You know, for most of us who practice organics, it's a really deeply held belief. And for us, it really started, you know, I was young and we worked incredibly hard on that Kim Crawford brand, and you know, our life sometimes just turns upside down, and that moment that you lose focus and you smack into the back of a garage door. Well, I smacked into a lamppost and obviously sort of had a few bumps and bruises, and they told me that I presented like a 55-year-old corporate businessman, so really stressed out, A-type, drive. And so I just started looking at you know, how I live, my immediate environment. So it really started with food, and the first thing that went was Diet Coke, and my headaches started going. And then, you know, just learning how to read food labels and what different things mean, cutting out additives, cutting out colorants, and slowly but surely eating more simply. And you know, we do very little out of a sachet, although he really likes 5-minute noodles or 2-minute noodles. So it got really simplifying it to the point of cooking everything from scratch. And then look at skincare. So changed to natural skincare as far as I could. You know, I think most of us were brought up in the era where, God, we had a lot of rubbish slowed and slapped onto our skins. And I think it does, you know, your whole body, like it's a whole system. So if you affect one organ, the skin, then other things are going to get affected. And then we looked at how we clean the house, because remember, that's probably your biggest chemical pool that you live in, because you've got chlorine and you've got all those BAM and shot and things like that, and sort of try and minimize that as far as possible and try and use eco-friendly products as far as possible. We really need to make a bit of a return now again to vinegar and baking soda, you know, good old abrasives. So it really hasn't been an overnight decision. It's been a long journey. And so when we sold Kim Crawford and decided we're not going to leave the industry, it was just a logical next step for us to go to make Loveblock organic. We were, of course, also 10 feet tall and bulletproof at the time. You know, we thought we knew it all. And we found a lovely piece of land on the top of the hill and basically fell in love with the view. And, you know, we've learned such a lot. We've basically learned that it's one step at a time, or sometimes one step forward, 3 steps back. And you know, so, and you learn. But the biggest learning was really that, you know, you have to wait for the vines to tell you when it is ready, not, because usually in this sort of highly efficient industry that we're in now, most people use contractors. So things get done to the vineyards when the contractors are ready and when they have time or when equipment is ready. And with organics, that window becomes much smaller. So you've really got to just wait for the vines to be ready to have things done to them. And so that was quite a big learning. And it's really about submission, you know. You can't force your way onto this land. So that's been quite interesting. There's the second thing is that it's all a system. You know, you can't only look at grapes and growing grapes, because everything around us in that immediate environment, and in this case, the Loveblock Organic Farm, affects the next thing. So obviously, I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the soil and organics in that sense, but obviously it starts with the soil because that's where everything is grown. And, you know, we've had probably about 50 or so years of herbicides and intensive chemical farming now. And it's really now that we're starting to see the cumulative effect of those things in human bodies, because in your bloodstream, you will probably have glyphosate. That's the most common herbicide that is used. And so it's cumulative. And I think that, you know, it affects other parts of your body. So in organics, we don't use any herbicides or pesticides, any chemical ones. So instead you use biological ways of trying to control pests and disease and weeds, mechanical ways to control weeds. So because our aim is to return the soil to fertility and balance. And what that looks like is enough minerals and nutrients, but also get a soil biota up and ready. So, you know, earthworms is probably the most efficient tiny little body that you'll ever see in your whole life before. Because if soil goes through a little earthworm, what he puts in is one end in the front, and what comes out the backside, and what comes out the backside is 37% more enriched. I think it's even more. I can't remember precisely, but it has an enormous effect on the soil. Of course, he aerates the soil and so forth as well. Regenerative agriculture is really gaining a lot of popularity as well. So, and biodiversity. So, you know, if you go to vineyards again, just have a look, especially, you know, in the bigger growing areas where you see rows of vineyard land with very little trees and weed strip sprayed. So it becomes this monocultural environment. And it's quite good to talk about that in this time of COVID, you know, because these things get around. So imagine if a virus, like what's gotten hold of us humans now with COVID, imagine if there's a virus that takes a hold of grapes, Sauvignon Blanc in the case of Marlborough, the whole industry will fall apart. So if you aim for biodiversity, that just adds some protection against that. It does other things, you know, it grows its own population of soil microbials in the roots, and the grapes obviously do its own, and then it affects each other and it makes it stronger and more resistant. So regenerative agriculture in terms of grapes is those beautiful cover crops often that you see. So that's one of the first things. So at Loveblock Farm, we view the whole thing as a system. So we do all those things. We also looking at a whole biodiversity plan, because there's lots of land that's not plantable in grapes. So where is it so boggy where grapes won't grow, and what trees can we plant in there? And so really look at those corridors of biodiversity, and it just does things to your vines. You know, they become a little bit more resistant, they more willing to go on their own natural yeasts and so forth. And if you look at, you know, we work on that whole closed nutrient loop. So everything that comes off the farm goes back onto the farm, whether it's hay or cow poop or grape prunings or whatever. It gets mulched up, it goes into the compost heap, grape skins, compost is made, and it goes back onto the grapes. So it's a system. Other things that we do, animals also play quite a big role in this. So we have a herd of ranging between 150 and 200, depending on how many calves there are, of Angus beef on the farm, and all the grazing paddocks are organic. And I think, are they organic yet, or are they just going in just now? Okay, so the cattle have got another year before they're certified organic, and that's another discussion for another day, because they've got to be born on the property and then go through the 3 years. So it's quite a long commitment. So they have a role too, you know, so they'll eat grass here and then they go and crap over there. So just disbursement of that sort of stuff. So each of those, I think there are about 22 grazing paddocks. Every year, one of them is put into a summer fallow. So they don't get grazed, nothing happens to it. Just so as to give it the opportunity to regenerate. I don't know if you remember from the old Bible stories, you know, there was the 7-year, like, remember with when Joseph went to Egypt and he taught that Pharaoh the 7-year cycle. So that's really where it comes from. So you give the soil a chance to rest. And then when the cattle go back on there, you have a lot more, your plant numbers a lot higher, and they stomp it into the ground, and then it's a better system. So it's that's part of the things that we do. There also, of course, the chickens, and we bring sheep in. Both the cattle and the sheep act as mowers in the vineyard. Because one of the biggest challenges we have is the weeds under the vines. Because you can spray it once a year or twice a year with Roundup, and it's really super easy. But if you don't spray with Roundup, then you've got to either cut the weeds, or you've got to do something else to them. So you also have to consider how many times you drive tractors through there and so forth. So it's quite a business, and it's more difficult, you know, and it's got more higher inputs. And then probably one of the things that we've neglected a little bit in the last few months is we have a big vegetable garden at the farm, and that also adds its own little bit of biodiversity, but it is supposed to, on the permaculture principles, it's supposed to feed everybody who works on the farm. So whether you prune or read the electricity meter or fix the tractor or, you know, drive a tractor, you should be able to pick your vegetables and have something to be fed from the farm. So we don't view it only as a piece of land that grows grapes. It's a beautiful big system. We're also now starting to incorporate more the biodynamic principles into the whole gig. So, you know, we make dandelion tea, and that is used for a specific purpose. So we're moving more and more into that direction. So basically eliminating more and more process and eliminating more and more additives as far as we can, and do things as naturally as we can. So that's really just an intro. I don't know, Liz, if you want to take it somewhere from here.
No, that's perfect. Just before we go on to the wines, does anyone have at this stage any questions for Erica on organics or the introduction that she's given at this stage? I think you've covered it very well, Erica. I did wonder, just with more weeds growing in the vineyards, that would change the water retention in the soil, presumably, because there's more plants growing there. How do you manage that side of it? Because water can be a shortage.
Well, so two things. Yes, it does affect that, but it also competes with the vine for nutrients and water. So you can imagine, I always liken it to you can imagine if these are two vines, underneath is, if you spray it, there's nothing to compete with the vine. And I always liken it to an only child from a wealthy family. You know, they get everything that's just there for them. They don't have to work really hard to get it. But these organic vines have to fight with the weeds, and it has to fight with the cover crop for their little bit of nutrients and water. So they have to dig deeper. It's a little bit like the, you know, the runty kid from a big family of 6 like I'm from. You really have to work hard to get what you want. So the expression is different.
Yes.
And that comes, you know, maybe when we taste the Sauvignon particularly, you'll see the effect of that. And I'll chip into Kim's talk there about what that does to the vine.
Cool, excellent, thank you. What we might do then is, shall we start on the wines? Now, for everyone out there tasting, you've got on your, where's my camera there, your little bottles there, you do have 2 numbers. So it says Flight 1, Glass 1, and then Flight 1, Glass 2, and so on. So the first flight, we've got 4 wines there. The key thing that you need to get right tonight is to make sure that you've poured the right wine at the time that Kim's talking about it. So in your first glass there, you've got the Riesling 2014. So as long as you pour number 1 right now, you'll be tasting the same thing Kim's about to talk to us about. Very good, Kim.
Okay. So this is from a vineyard which was developed organically but is no longer organic, because one of the things we learned that it's got a big paddock right next door to it, field, and the grass grub dynamite, so they would destroy the crop. So we have to basically spray it. So it's not organic. It's apart from the one spray that we do for the grass grub, it is organically sprayed, but we just can't. We'd be out of business basically if we didn't spray. So with the Riesling, it's grown on the hill in the Marlborough tree, so it's very windy and very low yielding. So we take it down to 5 canes each at either side of the head. So you've got 10 canes per plant and 10 bunches, so 1 bunch per cane. So it's very low yielding, and I mean, if it wasn't for the love of the business, we wouldn't be making this.
We'd be broke.
You'd pull it out and then you'd put Sauvignon Blanc in. Because we get about 6 tons a hectare here, where we normally get 12 to 14 or 10 to 12. So, you know, we're halving our grape production. In terms of winemaking, Riesling is pretty good. No sulfurs added before fermentation because it's got enough phenolics in the skins to carry it through. So we don't add sulfur in the vineyard, it just goes in as is. And then in the winery we tend to float nowadays, which is a newish process for us. So instead of settling it in the fridge like your orange juice and it goes to the bottom, we add an enzyme and then we pump nitrogen in, and it floats the muck to the top, and we're into fermentation usually 4 to 5 hours after we've picked the grapes. So it's very good from that perspective. From a winemaking perspective, I'm really happy that we can do that at Tohu. So okay. So just in terms, my wife really likes dry Riesling, so that's why it's ended up dry. There's the 2020, which has just been released, has actually got a little bit of residual sugar in it, because I reckon these wines are too hard. This one's 6 years old, and it's still got, I reckon, another 6 years before it's going to be really drinkable. So the Riesling's aged really well because the pH of them is so low. So this wine will be good for another 15 or 20 years, I would say, without any doubt. So
I think the beautiful thing about these really dry wines is that as soon as you put a bit of food with it, even if it's just a slice of dried bread, you know, then those beautiful flavors come alive.
I think you know, that it's absolutely wonderful to be able to have that tonight, but also to be able to have that in store, because, you know, it is okay, it's got longer to go in the bottle, it's showing some lovely age characteristics now, and when we drink everything so fresh, isn't it lovely to see that?
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of that avgas characteristic. it happens when you've got partial root zone drying on when you're ripening Riesling, and on the hill we get it every day. Honestly, it's so windy that the vines are under water stress every day, so he's just naturally going to get that sort of character, which I really enjoy. In Germany, they say it's in the good vintages they get this characteristic. So, yeah.
What did you call the character? Sorry, Kim.
AF gas. It smells like aviation gasoline to me.
Nice way of putting it. Yeah, it's very distinct in the wine, but I think it's one of the charms of it. It's brilliant. I haven't tasted that for a while. I'm now wondering why I haven't. It's very, very good.
Right, shall we move on?
Pinot Gris.
Pinot Gris.
So here we are, Pinot Gris.
Float one,
Lovely.
number 2.
Yeah, so vegan, organic.
Perfect. And I think everyone tasting with us tonight, Erica has some lovely little tasting books that have been made of all the wines. So, which is lovely, which has got all the bottles in there. One of the team's done a brilliant job at making a little book.
I know, I saw them, they're very pretty.
Isn't it pretty?
Yeah, very pretty.
Excellent. So Pinot Gris?
Pinot Gris, this is off the valley floor from the block we call the Triangle Block, which is just up past the woolshed. It's certified organic for biogrow. Crops a little bit more because it's not on the hill, so maybe at about 8 tonnes per hectare. Again, we're just basically machine harvesting. We bring it in, we float it, goes into inoculated with an organic yeast, because I'm not that convinced that natural fermentation is the way to go with these wines, but that's just me. Yeah. And then when I think it's in balance in terms of residual sugar, we just stop the ferment. So it's very simply made. It's just a good example of what we're actually getting from the vineyard, I think. Whereas with the Sauvignon, which you'll see next, we play a lot more with it. So, yeah.
So I think with Pinot Gris, and what you'll sort of see across the range, there's sort of a gravelly minerality at the back, and just little notes of savouriness, and that's just the characteristic of that area. If you taste wines from, say, Awatere River, if they get it from there, but from that area, you will get that sort of gravelly, slightly nuanced savouriness in the wines that you get at the back there. And just to get back to organics, you know, James Milton always says, you owe the earth 10 years of grace. You know, because we've pilfered it for so long. So give it 10 years before it starts showing itself a lot more. And then, you know, I think you start seeing an ethereal texture in organic wines that you don't see in chemically made wines. So I'm hoping that you can see that. Where I would like to drive this to is, and here we differ quite a lot on a lot of things, but I'd like to see this wine sit on lease for, say, 6 months. So maybe we play with that next year, so it just gets a bit of added complexity.
What I really like, there's a really sort of fresh cut pear character to it. Like, I think it's, you know, it's got like, it's lovely and dry and would be amazing with food, but there's this really beautiful cut pear character, and it's a very fresh pear. And I think to get that fineness in Pinot Gris with that fruit characters would be quite tricky, Kim. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what we're doing is Pinot Gris, when you're tasting it on the vine, it's green. It's Granny Smith apple, Granny Smith apple, Granny Smith apple, and then all of a sudden it becomes Nashi pear, and that's when we pick. And you've got to make sure that you're not too high in sugar when that change occurs, because you can actually end up with a wine which is too alcoholic. And the wine, because it's such a delicate varietal, you can't really have too much alcohol in the wine, otherwise it's the first thing people smell. So
I think, you know, as New Zealand winemakers, we're just coming to terms really with Pinot Gris now, because you walk that tightrope of sugar, as Kim says. If you leave it for too long to get your flavors, you're going to have too much sugar and high alcohol. So you know, sometimes you buy the Pinot Gris and it's a little bit too sweet and cloying. That's why, because that's a balance of sugar and alcohol that's so delicate. And then what we see with stressed vines, so like organic vines or older vines as well, is that you start seeing that the flavors appear earlier at lower sugar levels. In other words, you can have a dry wine with manageable alcohol that hasn't got alcohol of 14%, you know.
Erica, we've just had a little question here, and perhaps just also to explain two things. The first one is, are all of the Loveblock wines vegan? And the second thing is, what makes a wine vegan or not?
Well, okay, yes, all the Loveblock wines are vegan. The only thing is we can't do is add animal products. So gelatine's a major problem for wineries. So when we float, we now use a pea-based protein rather than using a gelatin. So it's quite a simple process. It's a bit more expensive, but very simple to actually become vegan, and it's become very, very important for us in export markets. So people want the wines to be vegan friendly. I mean, there's a whole lot of, I think, myth about how clean and non-chemical added winemaking is, commercial winemaking is. But I mean, it's not really anything like that at all. It's pretty much we do what we need to do.
Yeah. So it's the fining of the wine, isn't it? And animal products can be used, which don't, of course, end up in the wine because you're taking something out with them. But to be vegan friendly, you use non-animal products to fine.
Yeah, and even though you add an animal product, you can't be assured that it's actually there's nothing left in the wine, and more than likely is, but you can't guarantee it, so therefore we can't state it on the label.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's becoming more and more relevant, I think, here in New Zealand as well. We certainly asked a lot about it. So, and just for anyone on the tasting wondering, if you type vegan into the Glengarry website, you do get a page of all the wines together. So nice and easy for you. Cool, very good. Okay, shall we move to Sauvignon, or?
Yep.
Where are we up to?
I mean, so, you know, Sauvignon is a funny old thing. A lot of people look down their noses at it, and so did I, you know, when we sold our previous brand. And Jules Taylor always used to make such fun of me, but this project has really made me fall in love with Sauvignon again. And this is really, I think, quite a departure from the classic bombastic Marlborough style that, you know, some people like it, other people don't. This is what we're doing. But it was really at first driven by organic management in the vineyard and in the winery. Because remember I said about the competition that the vine has with the weeds and the cover crop, and having to fight for every bit of nutrients and every bit of water. So what that does to the canopy, in other words, the leaves and the plant that you see above there, is that it's not as green and big, and because there are two impact aromatics in Sauvignon Blanc. The one tastes like capsicum and grapefruit and cut grass. And then there's another group that tastes like peach and pineapple and those lovely fruit flavors. So in the vineyard, we can do two things to manipulate those flavors, and with organics you don't. And so at first we thought it wasn't the right thing to do, but then you look at it. Remember I said the vine tells you what to do, we don't tell the vine what to do. And so the flavors of grapefruit and you know, the big green and capsicum is played down, and the others are elevated because we don't fire the vine with nitrogen either, so it doesn't get commercial fertilizers. So the conventional way of doing Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, you get these big green vines, and you have to really fossick around to find the clusters, because if they're in the shade, the green component, aromatic components are pronounced. So, and then we went into a philosophy where we actively remove the leaves a little bit more, so that they get a bit more sun, so that you get a bit more of the peach and the pineapple. And I think this with this one, you really do get that. You'll also get quite a bit of struck match on the nose.
Definitely.
Yeah. So that, because 30% of the wine was fermented in oak, and then it went. I'll hand it over to Kim, but again, we have a philosophical difference again here, don't we, dear? Anyway, I like it just off-center struck match, because I think it adds a little layer of complexity, and then you get to all the peach and the pineapple and the beautiful fruit once it's on your palate.
Yeah, so 30% of this wine is hand-picked, whole bunch pressed and run straight to barrel, so we don't fine it at all or anything, and it, honestly, it's just whatever's on the grapevine. So there's been a bit of sulfur there, so you're getting H2S produced. And to be quite honest, I don't like it, but I just do what I'm told. So the pHs will vary from like pH of 3 at the start to a pH of about 4.2 when we do the hard press. So you've got a huge range of characters, and it's all done with natural fermentation. So it's just whatever happens to do it does the job. And yeah, it's not my desired style of Sauvignon Blanc, but I do what I'm told.
Well, I think that this is, this is about Loveblock, and it really is organic principles guiding us through the vineyard and the growth process. We can make them look pretty and big and green and zippy, but it doesn't speak of the place thing. Then it speaks more of the winemaker and how she manipulates it. So we're taking a different direction, and you'll see when you taste organic wines, they won't be so big on the nose. It's more about the palate. And I'm really excited about Sauvignon. I think, and this year, I just love all the pineapple and the peach, and then laced with basil. But the exciting thing that's happening now is I went to South Africa last year, and a friend of mine told me that he had his first Sauvignon in a little amphora. I said, so what does it taste like? And he said, I don't know what the hell happens there, but it's amazing. So came back, and we bought some amphora, and we've...
Oh, wow.
There's beautiful concrete eggs. So next year we're adding some more eggs. And so your 2020 Sauvignon will have 30% of these alternate vessels. So taking it into, I think, lifting the quality and taking it into quite an interesting sphere.
Yeah, I think all of the wines so far, and particularly the Sauvignon Blanc, there's a really nice textural element to them. They've got everything that you'd expect, but there's a texture there and a savoury aspect that just drives right through to the finish. I think, there's a commonality to them for sure. Really, really good.
10 years of grace.
Excellent.
Yeah, for a non-Sauvignon drinker, I love the style that some of people are working on. If you look at other brands like, I suppose Mahi, and I really like the wines from Dog Point, Greywacke, Mahi, Tifarera. So it's all taking it in a different direction.
And I think there's definitely room there for Sauvignon Blanc to be taken in a different direction. We need some diversity in style for sure. We've just had a lovely comment here that one of the people joining us tonight, Erica, is not a Sauvignon Blanc drinker, but really enjoys that.
Yes, I do. I've been known to deal to a bottle myself from time to time.
Yeah. And I think, that's the thing, is we need some diversity in Sauvignon Blanc produce, which we're seeing, which is great. So that, the one-trick pony that it perhaps was in the past, it's definitely not anymore. And speaking of that, you've got a very different wine next.
Yeah. It really concerns me that people think that Sauvignon Blanc is a specific thing. And, we see it in Australia where they go, but it's the most drunk white wine. So we really have to change that. So the next one, I think is quite special. And we've just released this. So here we're tasting Sauvignon Blanc again, but quite a different beast, totally.
So this is part of the focus at Loveblock was to get the total sulfur down on our wines.
Total additives, yeah.
Total sulfur mainly.
Yeah.
So we explored this product, which is a green tea extract, and in 2018 I looked at it and I thought, well, So we added at harvest time, it's usual for us to add potassium metabisulfite and ascorbic acid as an additive in the vineyard. That's to save the varietal characteristics of Sauvignon Blanc, because it's got a very thin skin and it tends to have no tannin, so it oxidizes quite easily. So that's a standard procedure, which means you start off going into fermentation with a total sulfur of around 40 parts. When you're trying to get a wine in the bottle under 100, that makes it very difficult. So we tried this green tea product in 2018 and it seemed to work. So after fermentation, I said, well, don't sulfur it. We'll just add another 5 parts green tea. And we did that. And I didn't add it just before bottling, and it went pink, which is quite understandable from a winemaking perspective, but the color did come back. So this year with the 19, which you've got, we added another 5 parts just at bottling, and that's basically made the wine look the part. So we used to call it orange, but it's not really an orange wine because it doesn't have huge skin contact. So it's just it's a wine that's made everything I was taught and told at school, I've thrown out the window, and we're now doing green tea.
I think this is quite an important development for us here in New Zealand. You know, I know in South Africa people have played with this for a long time, not green tea, but their rooibos tea. We know that these things have massive antioxidant capabilities. People are doing research in medicine, in health, we know about cosmetics and all those sorts of things. So we've really seen between the 2 vintages how incredibly effective it is as an antioxidant / preservative, because sulfur has both as a bit of antioxidant capability and then a lot of preservation capability. So this is so potent that it doesn't need that preservation capability. So next year we'll be looking at green tea versus rooibos tea versus honeybush tea to find the most effective one, because what you don't want is transfer the flavor of green tea into the wine. So you don't want it to taste like green tea or banana or whatever, you know. It still must be Sauvignon Blanc.
Erica, sorry, we've just had a comment that been waiting to taste this. It's mind-blowing. Didn't expect
awesome.
that surprise. Well done.
You taste it's a little bit more tannic because the green tea is in fact a tannin, right? So this is so perfect with those things that's got a bit of fat, like, you know, pork, I think is perfect. So natural wine you generally put with pork. So all these, so this is not quite natural, but it's not quite conventional either. So, you know, we're well on our way. I'm really excited about this to see where we can take this.
We've got someone else that's just said they discovered your wines during the Urban Wine Walk in Ponsonby and loves them. So you've got a big fan online tonight. Kim, just on sulphur, one thing I know we get asked a lot in stores, we have people come in and say, I want a wine that has no sulphur. And, you know, we try and explain that there's going to be some naturally occurring, but can you just explain for everyone, you know, there's a difference, isn't there, between adding sulphur and not adding sulphur?
Yeah, I mean, your yeast will naturally produce sulfur dioxide during fermentation. So we've got to have a total sulfur below 10 parts per million before we can say contains no sulfurs, which we actually can do with the 2020, I think. It depends on the yeast you use. So now we're going to no sulfur producing yeast. So the first one I had, I think the first year, the 18, was something like 22 parts total sulfur, and then last year I got it down to 15, and this year I'm under 10. So we'll be able to say it contains no sulfates. But yeah, there is going to be some natural production of sulfur dioxide by a yeast during fermentation. There's nothing we can do about it. Yeah.
No,
but we don't add any sulfites to the wine.
So here's the, I mean, it's almost a, it's quite weird because your sulfur is going to be below 10 parts per million to be able to make the statement or not make the statement contains sulfites. So even if you don't add sulfur, sometimes there's still all these sulfides. So you now know why it's in the fermentation process, but it doesn't mean that it was added.
And also, as your threshold for what's scientific, as when we only got 10 or 15 parts, it's very inaccurate in terms of the analysis at the lab.
Precision.
So the precision is really bad at the labs at the low end, because they're used to having a total sulfur of 120 or 130, which is what the machine is geared up to expect, and they get something at 10, so it could be 5 or it could be 20. You don't really know, so it's very inaccurate. The way the machines work, they tend to take a big random sample,
analyzes. But so all the wines that you see here tonight are made as per organic prescription. So we have to keep the sulfur below 100 parts per million in any way. So it usually sits around about 50 to 60. So it's all the wines are low sulfur anyway. But now we just try and get them to the best minimum we can. Anyway, some people say, that they're really affected by them. And some people are not. So, but it gives people an option, right? And I think it does amazing things to flavor. I think in my view, it lets the flavor flow a little bit more easily. So I don't know if you can taste in there. There are these notes of cumin and the notes of saffron and sort of a lot more exotic spices. And then this grippy bit at the back. So it's quite a different expression of Sauvignon that you probably not likely to see very often.
No, I think actually this month and what we've put together in our wine letter, we've described it as a whole new category, Erica, because it's so unique. But I think it's also just so relevant right now as we're more and more talking about sulfur and about what we're adding and about ways of preserving things. So it's very, very cool. Thank you.
I'm just going to scoot back and get the next flight.
Okay, so for those who are tasting, that was the first 4 wines in the first flight. And what you need to now do is either find 4 more glasses or empty those and get yourself ready with the next 4 wines. And if someone could perhaps just give me a thumbs up or a yes, we're ready with the next 4 wines. I'll just get mine sorted here, Erica.
Yep. So as you can see, in our household, there's very healthy discussion, debate, because our son Rory's got his own view. I mean, in his view, everything should be on in oak or on lees for at least 12 months, and all be natural wine, etc. So maybe when he comes into business one day, we'll go that way. But we certainly have healthy and robust discussion.
Yeah,
because we come from different points of view. I'm trained viticulturally. Kim's from the winemaking perspective, and Rory wants to do everything, which is great. You have to be.
He's young.
When you're young, you have to be able to. You've got to want to change everything. Otherwise, you'll change nothing.
Exactly. So I've had some thumbs up there, Erica. So we're good when you guys are. I'm not quite there, but that's okay. I will catch up.
Okay, guys. So now I think one of the probably most. I know one should be very careful in the way in which one describes these wines, but geez, these flavors of Gewurztraminer are just so seductive. You cannot help but go for another look and have another glass, or So the vineyard is the same as where the Riesling comes from, and this was on organics for quite a long time. So the crop again is really, really low. So we don't make it every year, and when we do make it, we make enough to last for 4 years. So this one was basically just bottled. Put your nose in it, and you still get quite almost sort of quite a little bit of a sherbetiness, but you get that lovely, think Arabia, Turkish delight and rose water and fennel and those lovely things. And then I'm going to hand over to Kim with the winemaking. But what I would just want to say, this is one of the most beautiful, delightful wines that anybody can wish to make. bloody hard to sell because people don't know how to say the name. Hey Liz, isn't that one of the problems that we have with this beautiful varietal?
I think it's how to say it, but I think it's also whenever people taste it, they love it, and then they forget about it. It's one of these varieties that gets forgotten. And I think also there's a misconception that Gewurztraminer is always going to be sweet. And then what do you do with it? And it's one of the most versatile food wines. And I think, you know, we forget all that. So I think it's just we need to remember Gewurztraminer.
Yeah, I think that, and we're so lucky in New Zealand because we truly are cool climate, and you've got these loads of acid that can carry a bit of sugar. So, Kimmy, over to you.
Okay. So this is,
you need to make this way.
oh, sorry.
I'm just getting him in the screen, but you know.
Yes. Thank you.
With this, half the wine got 8 hours skin contact at the winery, so we brought it in and just at the end of the day, because Gewurz is very early in the season, so there's plenty of room in the presses. So just stuck it in the press for 8 hours, give it a bit of skin contact, which helps with the aromatics, I think, and with the flavour profile. And then basically the second lot came in and we just fermented them together, and yeah, the wine is what it is. So it was just very simple. Again, this is not from an organic property because of exactly the same reason as it's got a paddock next door to it. So, and they really love Gewurztraminer. Grass Scrub really love Gewurztraminer. The Sauvignon Blanc, it's not really eaten by a lot of things. They don't seem to like the flavour, but Gewurztraminer, they absolutely love the flavour of it. So we couldn't work out the first couple of years we didn't get a crop, and it was because they were coming in and eating the bunches rather than the leaves on the Gewurztraminer. So yeah, it's just one of those things. Unfortunately, we can't have this as organic. It was developed organically, but
we kept it in there for about 6 years.
We kept it in until we decided finally
we're losing too much money. Yeah. So the thing about those grass grubs, you will have seen them around fruit trees. It's about the size of my fingernail, and it's a beautiful bronze beetle that flies about. But it's obviously got that cycle. So a certain time of the year, they fly and they become active. So then 20 minutes past sunset, they fly towards the silhouette of the sun, and we planted vineyards in their way. So of course they went to the vineyards. First they have sex for about 2 hours, and then they eat for 3 hours. Then they fall down, lay their eggs, and the grubs grow, and the whole cycle starts all over again. So, you know, you almost have to sacrifice one or two rows at the ends, and a few, you know, plants either at the edges of the vineyard for these things to feed. What we do now with the little triangle vineyard where the Pinot Gris grows is, you know, bee netting. We cover it with very fine netting for about a 6-week period when these things fly around. But honestly, they're an incredible pest, an expensive pest, and if God wants to take away one pest, I ask that it's that one. I can cope with flies, but that bloody thing.
Yeah. It's delicious. I love the palate weight. It's lovely.
Already, huh? Yeah, and it's only been bottled about 4 weeks ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So my feeling is that in 4 or 5 years, this wine is going to be so beautiful, or even 2 months, 3 months.
Yeah. It's improved a lot since we bottled it. Yeah, they do get the filtration method we use pre-bottling is pretty hard on the wines. So we don't get bottle shock anymore because we have a screw cap rather than a cork. So in the old days when I started making wine, we never used to release anything for 4 to 6 weeks after we bottle it because the cork acts like a sponge and it just sucks the aromatics out of the wine. So you could actually see the bottle shock, and it would take 6 months for that to come, or 6 weeks for that at least to come back. But with the technology we're using now, the crossflow filtration is bad, but it's nowhere near as bad as a cork. So
I also, you know, in those early days when we first started making wine, it was Gewurztraminer would take a long time to come into its own. because you almost taste it in blocks for the first 2 or 3 years, and then it comes into its own. So I think technology in this case has really made a difference to the readiness of the wine post-bottling.
Excellent. We've just had a question come through here. First of all, a comment. Someone has said that this is nice, very, very nice. And then the question is, what food would you partner it with?
I think if you, any of those Asian dishes, I mean, I'm so into it. Vietnamese, or those Chinese, anything with a little bit of, for me, a little bit of heat, a little bit of ginger, basically Asian food, particularly if you go in the direction of Vietnamese, Cambodian, you know, the spicier end.
Yeah, so we've got some bang bang chicken tonight, which will be quite nice with this, I think.
Excellent. Let's hope Rory's got that cooking.
Oh, I had to go down in the intermission and turn it over, so it's fine.
I think also, Erica, like a sort of apricot tart, if you perhaps had some cardamom spice in the pastry, like I think you can put this with that kind of sort of a tart or a nice strong cheese as well.
Yes, blue cheese. And the other thing that someone once said is that he likes to use this sort of wine for is charcuterie, you know, especially when it's got a bit of fat in.
Yeah.
Like those beautiful, whatever the fancy name is for them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Nice sauces on. I think very much like they do in Alsace, where you've got, you know, lots of pork, lots of cured meats, and, you know, obviously lots of aromatic wines too. Excellent.
Cured meat. Okay, so guys, so now we're going to start. Oh, I'm talking out of turn here, Liz. Now we're going to look at, I'll tell you before Kim goes into his rant about the technicalities, but I'll tell you a little bit about this vintage. So 2018 was this really hot in Central. And I don't remember if you remember that year. It was, how many days were over 35? Not usually they get, you know, 3 or 4. This was like 15 days over 30, which is hot. Anyway, we made the wine, we tasted it, and you can see this wine's really, really light colored. You know, it's really light colored. And he sent the wine to the US, and you know, in the US, they're really oriented towards ratings. So Wine Spectator, Wine Enthusiast, where in New Zealand and Australia, people look to wine shows. Over there, they look to ratings. And the company we work with, I said to them, now, I just want to check, have you sent this wine in for, you know, for tasting? And I was going to say to them, well, we just really want you to keep it for another few months. And they said, no, you know, we sent it about 2 weeks ago. And what do you know? We were so tentative, and it made the top 100 for Wine Spectator, which is a super big deal for New Zealand wine to get on there. So what do you know? The wine corrects so beautifully in the bottle, I think. Single Pinot and Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc are the two things that do that. They just have got the ability to kind of pull themselves together and put on their best show, don't they?
I think, Erica, looking at it, we have 2019 first and then 2018.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, right. But that's okay.
Okay.
Because the story works well.
The story works well. So I'm going to pull.
Just so that everyone knows. So that was the 18 that you were talking about, which is everyone's glass number 3.
19 for Kim, and I'll just taste from his glass. So that vintage was normal.
Well, no, we haven't. Central Otago seems to be getting a lot more pressure from the south in terms of rain. So this year when I went down to look at the grapes, honestly, the clover was nearly knee-high in the vineyard there, whereas normally we'd have nothing at the end.
This is 19 we're talking about?
Yeah, this was, I'm so sorry, 2020, but 19 was the same.
No, it wasn't.
With the rain, it was.
Anyway, I don't think so, but
yeah.
The colour, the fact of the matter is the colour is equal in the two wines. So the funny thing, if it's, you know, it's a very dry vintage and a cooler one together. So here you go, 19, Kimmy.
Okay, so the 19, this is all hand-picked and whole bunch. No, sorry, not whole bunch. So it was hand-picked and came to a sorting table at Tohu, and then runs it down the sorting table, which just basically we can take any of the rubbish out. But one thing I've found with
pretty.
Central Otago Pinot Noir is, as long as I pick it on the right day, I don't have to do anything from a winemaking perspective. It's the most simplest thing to do. The analysis coming in is almost textbook perfect. So, yeah, and then it just cold soak for 5 days, and then just naturally warm it up, and it goes through natural fermentation.
I just had a text from someone saying, if you say you cold soak it for 5 days, what does it mean? What does it do to the wine?
I don't really know, but that's what everybody else does.
No, man, you must know.
It tends to
Extract.
extract colour at the early stages of the ferment. So colour is the major thing that we want with Pinot Noir. So yeah, we cold soak it at about 5 degrees Celsius. So this year, 2020, when the hand pickers went in, it was 0 degrees Celsius. So we didn't have to actually refrigerate the fruit at all. It just actually was there. So it's a pretty harsh growing environment down there in terms, you know, they had a frost there on January the 2nd 2 years ago. So I mean, it's a very hostile area to grow grapes, but I mean, when we get them right, it's fantastic. And
Gee, but look at the colour, it's beautiful. Also, so this is a small little vineyard that we only plant Pinot Noir, and it's a slightly warmer area of Central. So, you know, if you go to Cromwell and you go up towards Terrace, we're sort of there. Across the road from us is Rudy Bauer. Next to us is Mudhouse. Up above us, sort of diagonally, is Mondillo and Misha. So we're in that little area.
Okay, so it's a vineyard in Central Otago that you own and that you farm organically?
no, I haven't quite got there because we had rabbit issues in the early days. So the rabbits came in and chewed some of the vines. So we had to replant them. So one thing we didn't understand, we put our rabbit wire all the way around the vineyard, as you do, to keep them out. But then the little fuckers would get in.
Language.
And then they do what rabbits do, and they multiplied. And then we actually had a major issue with them ring barking the vines. So we had to replant. So we've learned now with organics that we can't go to organics until we've got a full canopy, a full wire, and a full canopy. So
yes, and so the other thing also there is, so it's almost like you have a ground zero, like a 0 point, and you've got to take steps to the negative. So right now we're in the phase where we're working on the soil, so doing the composting, trying to get the organic matter up a little bit and trying to get soil fertility a little bit better. And then when the vines are ready, they can go into conversion, because it's a little bit like this thing. And I promise you, I've seen this happening to vines. It's a little bit like giving up cigarettes, coffee and booze all at the same time. I mean, you become a quivering mess, right? Coffee's bad enough, so try all three and you're a quivering mess. So that's another thing that I've learned. You sort of got to take it little by little. So take off one, the next, and the next, and then we go into the full conversion.
So you're heading to conversion in Central Otago?
yeah, well, we've just planted another half a hectare on the hill, which means we'll be another 2 years away at least from going into full conversion down there. So, and I've planted a little bit of Syrah because just for something different. So
yeah, we on the run in. We're in -2 now to get to ground zero. Yeah.
Okay.
I can tell you something. Anything organic is not for profit. You know. It really is a lot of work and a lot of effort, and if you're an accountant, you must have a real belief in this thing, otherwise you wouldn't do it.
yeah, it's not that
you can see a difference in the wines though, Erica.
yeah, and it's from my perspective, it's not as though it's not our cost of production. Our cost of production is about the same. It's the reduction in yield is a major issue. So costs us about the same to grow a ton of run a hectare of organic grapes as it does to run a hectare of non-organic grapes. But our yield is 30% lower on organics.
No, you've got a lot more tractor passes, it's going on.
Can I have a look at the books?
I will.
But yeah, it's not as much the cost of producing the grapes. It's the fact that you actually get 30% less is the problem.
Very good. Well, not good for the bank balance, but good for the wine.
You know, I think you'll see that. And, you know, the most encouraging thing, I think that's happened in the last 10 years since we started doing this. We started practicing organics in 2008. And is that a lot more growers are jumping on, you know. It's really exciting. In Central, they've got such a tight community of viticulturists and grape growers, and there's quite a lot of this sort of stuff going on. So, and in other regions, so it's growing little by little.
I was reading that we're now, I think it's 10% of production in New Zealand is organic. And of course, that's on a backdrop of 98% sustainable. So I was comparing it to around the world, and we sit very high comparatively as a percentage already. So it's good. It's I think it's definitely where also New Zealand wine needs to go.
I think we're getting there, you know. It is we're getting there little by little. And if it's like this sort of organic wine week and you guys giving organic wine a, you know, a special little place, that really helps.
Definitely.
Helps us. So now we're at the 18 Pinot Noir, right?
Yes. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this was a very hot, very dry year.
We had a spray residue issue with this, so I had to hang it on a little bit longer than I normally would. But I managed to fix it just at the death, so that's all right.
So isn't it amazing, just 1 year, what the difference that it makes in this wine? Gosh, we drink our wine so early. And maybe another good thing of the COVID is that, you know, people will have a little bit more stock to sit on and won't turn the vintages so early. So I love bottle age or any bottle time on white, and particularly white wines, but naturally red as well. So it's got all that ripeness and black cherries, and I think the little vineyard's giving us a nice handprint of, there's always sort of it's not mushroomy, forest flory thing going on.
Yeah, it's certainly, if you talk, Kim, to producers in Central Otago about their 2018, they're quite keen to move on. And, you know, you've shown an absolute gem here in a vintage where most producers just wanted to ignore it and go to the next one.
Yeah, I think we're very lucky. The vineyard parcel, so basically I was on the board of Mudhouse at this stage, and I said I'd really like 10 hectares of vineyard. So they just cut off the bit further up towards Mondillo from their block. And it's actually the warmest site in Bendigo, so we're pretty lucky. And it was purely by chance. So
Yeah, you've got a gem there.
Okay, now my favorite.
Now your favourite, Erica?
Now the little favourite of mine.
I was going to say, you've had a few favourites tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think Moscato and Gewurztraminer sort of fall in the same aromatic flavour class. So if you want to go to little sweet Moscato, this was a one-off. So when we were 10 feet tall and bulletproof, we thought we're going to change the industry, you know. We were going to plant Sauvignon Blanc. We're going to make all these other things. So we grew Tempranillo, we grew Anise, we grew Chenin Blanc, we grew Moscato, we grew Saint Laurent, we grew
Sauvignon Gris.
Sauvignon Gris. And of course, all the things that are incredibly difficult to sell. But we also, we always knew that this is an experimental block. Things could work and things couldn't work. Well, what we learned is what grows in that very difficult environment on the top of that hill. And one of the things I'm really proud to announce is Moscato. And we're planting next year, we're planting some more Moscato. So this vineyard has since been disestablished and we're going to plant it in a better spot. But Moscato is the most eaten grape when we go to vintage. That and Gewurztraminer, it is absolutely beautiful, the flavors.
Yeah, so when you need to find the vineyard workers at lunchtime, you go either to the Moscato or you go to the Gewurztraminer, because it'll be in one of the two spots.
Because you can't stop eating, I promise you. It's that, you know what seduction is? Seduction is wanting more, isn't it?
Yeah.
And these flavors really does it for me. So this is also quite interesting. It's starting to show some nice Hanepoort aging on the nose now. Of course, with my South African background, Moscato is it's one of the Hanepoort. It's like a standard drink over there. So it just gives you that opulent richness as well. But it's not just a sweet wine. This is a fortified wine, so it was made quite differently.
Yeah, so we just basically fermented it down until I thought it was right from a sugar perspective, and then we add grain alcohol to basically arrest the fermentation. So it was just a bit of a guess, because we only had a few barrels of it. So
Never done it before.
Never done it before in my life. No. So just pump some alcohol in, and then it didn't automatically stop it. It went down a little bit further than I wanted, but I'm still pretty happy with the wine, really.
I also think that in the early years, it really wasn't as good as it is now, because it sort of jumped around in flavors a little bit. I don't know what the grain alcohol did to it, but it just takes time to settle down, because my gosh, this is lovely, isn't it?
So yeah, it was designed to be a muscat de bone de Venise style, but it's not quite there, but it's not too bad, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a little bit richer in character than the Muscat Bone de Venise, but Bone de Venise also tends to be drunk young and, sort of within a couple of years of vintage. Whereas Erica, I agree, I tried this when it first came out and I love it tonight. I'd really like a really nice washed rind cheese, preferably one that's sort of running across the plate. And I think, the food and wine match would be fantastic. The smellier, the better.
But it finishes the interesting thing is it feels like it finishes dry, doesn't it?
What is the sugar content, Kim? Do you know roughly?
No, I can't remember. I mean, that's
23. No, it was more.
It would be closer to 50, I would think. I'll have to have a look. I'll have to have a look back, but honestly, I can't remember.
It's very, very good.
And as the wines age, they always become drier. So this wine, when we first tasted it, it was too sweet for me, but now it's actually coming to balance quite nicely.
Yeah, it is nicely balanced. It really does feel like it drops quite suddenly to dryness, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it's certainly anything but dry, but yeah, you're right. It also doesn't, I think, when you first taste it, you don't notice the alcohol. It doesn't spark sort of a instant thinking that it has been fortified. It's the balance is there, which is good. Goes on and on, that flavour on the end.
Yes, so stand by for in about 5 years' time, we'll start delivering a bit more Moscato again, and also planting a bit more Chenin Blanc.
Love Chenin. Chenin. Yeah. So with the Moscato that you're planting, what sort of style are you going to make it in this style or?
I think we also made a Moscato Brut Sparkling, remember, but the brand wasn't ready for that sort of, because we released that as we released the brand, and it was too early in the brand's life to release such quirky things. So I really like that style. Because remember, Liz, it took all those flavors of a sweet, so you think it's a sparkling wine that's going to finish sweet, and then boom, it was bone dry.
Yeah.
So that was quite interesting. I quite like that. Yeah. But probably just still, I think. Yeah. But again, it needs time. Chenin needs so much time, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Excellent. Well, very good. That's been an amazing tasting of the wine. We've had a comment on that last wine there that it's wonderful. Was going to ask if it was designed to emulate Muscat Bones de Venise. This has come from Liz, who has said she actually prefers this, Kim. So
Oh, fantastic.
you go. No, the wines are looking really, really good, Erica and Kim. Thank you very much for taking us through them. And I think just with the Pinot, just wanted a bit of a shout out on that 2018, because I was looking at our stock the other day and saw that we do have just a small amount of it left. So a little bit of a top tip for tonight is that's the rating that it got in America. I could see exactly why it did. It's gorgeous. And the fact that there's somehow a few bottles lurking around Glengarry is probably because we bought all of it when it did. So if you're interested in that, there is some of that in store. And tomorrow what we will do is we'll send everyone out an email just with a link to all of the wines which you'll be able to purchase online, or of course you can come into our stores. And that link tomorrow will also have a recording of the tasting tonight if you'd like to come back and revisit any part of it. So Erica, Kim, thank you very much for taking the time out tonight. What a wonderful way to start Organic Wine Week. And more lovely comments coming through there. Someone who doesn't drink red wine, Kim, but has loved the 2018 Pinot. So there we go. You've converted Sauvignon and non-red wine drinkers tonight, which is great. Cool.
I also wanted to say quickly, as a punt for organics, guys, if you see a gnarly apple or something organic, if you have a few extra cents and dollars in your pocket, just buy it. You know, support those farmers.
Yeah, here. Yeah, and it'll taste better. As
Yeah.
we see tonight, makes a difference. Excellent. Well, thank you very much. More lovely comments. Can't wait to order. First day back at work, and this has made it amazing. Excellent. Thank you very much to everyone that's joined us, and thank you again, Kim and Erica, for taking the time out. Much appreciated.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, I love all the comments coming through, Erica.
Oh, the Riesling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. It's very, very exciting. No, the wines look really good. Excellent. Thanks, guys. Do enjoy your chicken, and I hope Rory has cooked it to your satisfaction.
No, I'm going to go dinner now.
The roast chicken. Thanks, guys. Have a lovely evening.
Cool. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.